He kōna e purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Off Northland's east coast sits one of New Zealand's premier marine reserves.
The Pornites is, it's a special place. There's none other like it in the world.
It's often listed in the best dive sites in the world to come and visit.
Not just for the abundance of fish. The curious snapper, the pink and blue mau, the shoals of two-spotted demoiselles, but also for the array of life clinging to the rock.
Really colourful animals that are living on the walls, so we're seeing corals, sponges, anemones, bryozoans.
But all this life now seems under threat, as these rock walls are being scraped clean by one rapidly multiplying creature.
If we don't protect it, there'll be nothing here for our great-grandkids to talk about. All they'll be left with is stories, and it would be really cool to have more than just stories.
Kia ora, nau mai haramai ki te ao hurahanga, ko Clark and Canon tēnei. Today we head to Tawhitirahi, the Pornites Islands, east of the Tutukaka coast, to learn about a particularly tricky problem and a research trial on how it could be managed.
The actual urchin's not that big, but it's got such long spines.
This is Dr. Ari Spixma, a research fellow at the University of Auckland. And in his hand is a long-spined sea urchin, also called Centrostephanus.
A big one might be, the actual test, which is, the skeleton of the urchin might be 100 to 120 millimetres in diameter, whereas this one, that's about a 70, just over 75 mils. And you can see how big its mouth is. That's its mouth protruding out there.
Right, yes. Looks like a beak.
Yeah, so they basically just go around, using that Aristotle's lantern to pick everything off the reef.
And this is the tricky problem. Centrostephanus has long been found in the Pornites Islands, in low numbers. It's not endemic, that is, unique to New Zealand, because it's also found in Australia, from where genetics suggest it originally came. But it is native, as in, it's been here a while. It belongs here. But in recent years, the population of this urchin has exploded. And they've been using their totally weird-looking mouthparts, called Aristotle's lantern, to scrape the rocks clean, creating Centrostephanus barrens, areas where all you find is bare rock and long-spined urchins. And if you're thinking, barrens, wait, I've heard that term before, but with kinnabarrens, is this the same thing? Well, the answer is yes, and also, most definitely, no. They're different species of urchins, they live at different depths and eat different things at different times, and importantly, because of the length of the Centrostephanus spines, they have different predators. But we'll get into that. First, an introduction to the marine reserve itself. Here's Dr. Monique Lads, a senior marine technical advisor at the Department of Conservation.
It was closed to commercial fishing in 1981, and then in 1998 it became a full no-take marine reserve. And it protects one of the most unique marine ecosystems that we have in New Zealand. The reason it's so unique out here is because of the way that the currents run into it and the water temperature that's flowing through. So typically out at the nights you'll have warmer water and you'll also have better visibility. But it also supports an ecosystem that is incredibly diverse and incredibly colourful. So the really famous thing about the Pornites is the wall communities that we have here. So diving at the Pornites, as soon as you get in the water, you're going to start to see really colourful animals that are living on the walls. So we're seeing corals, sponges, anemones, bryozoans. They collectively create what is a system that is not seen in many other places.
And because of that, it has become kind of a major tourist attraction, really, hasn't it? There's a lot of people that come here annually to dive.
Absolutely. It's one of the most dived sites in New Zealand, if not the most dived site. And people come from all over the world to see this. It's often listed in the best dive sites in the world to come and visit.
It's not just these walls that make it a special place to dive. There's been ongoing monitoring of the marine reserve, and the numbers of many fish species have grown significantly since protection.
There's some places where you dive and looking back behind you, you'll just see a wall of snapper following you around. Or if you get the angle right when you're in one of the beautiful arches that we have here at the Poor Knights, you'll just get a wall of blue mau mau just kind of staring back at you and wondering what you are. We have been able to see just the huge diversity in the kelp and the seaweeds that we have around, and exploring all of the strange caves that are here, especially Rico, which is the largest underwater cave by volume in the Southern Hemisphere. All of our marine reserves are important places to preserve. This one has a particular specialty to it because of its uniqueness, and it is somewhere that we're all wanting to look after as much as we possibly can.
It's a pretty stunning spot even above water. We've got lucky with the weather, and from the back deck of Te Kaihōpara, the University of Auckland's research vessel, the green-topped islands and stunning sea arches are a gorgeous sight. The team on board from the university includes Ari and his colleagues from the Rocky Reef Lab, which is led by Dr. Nick Shears. This includes field technician Dr. Celia Balemi, who did her PhD on the behaviour of the Centrostephanus in New Zealand, or, as she calls them, Centros.
Through Nick's long-term monitoring and through one of the chapters of my thesis, we monitored the changes through time, and we've seen a really big population increase, specifically at the offshore islands in northeastern New Zealand over the last 25 years.
So that was kind of the first thing that you did, figure out what kind of increase you'd been seeing, because people have been talking about this for them, saying, oh, I'm seeing more of these large urchins, but you went and dug into the data.
Yeah, so between 1999 and 2022 there was a 9.3 times increase at the Poor Knights Islands, and slightly lower at the Mokahinau as well. And then we also saw the emergence of Centrostephanus barons at both groups of islands, which had never been recorded previously. Because at the Poor Knights, prior to marine protection, there was kinner barons around the islands, but once the snapper numbers increased, they decreased the kinner numbers and they went back to a healthy kelp forest. But we saw with the increase of centros that there was the emergence of these new barons, which part of my thesis was also they occur a lot deeper than kinner, so they in a similar depth band, but they also extend down to around 40 metres, but we were seeing barons for 25 metres as well. So the impact is across a much broader depth band as well.
And that broader depth band presumably is important because you're kind of eating into more of the range that the kelp would be found in.
So yeah, with kinner, they tend to form barons between 5 to 10 to 15-ish metres. And so generally there's a band of deeper kelp, which is good because if the kinner numbers are reduced either by restoration or by predator numbers, the kelp can come back quite quickly. But if you, with centros, if they form across the whole depth band and there's not kelp around, it can slow the recovery of those habitats as well.
So another thing that you did as part of your thesis was try to figure out exactly what they're eating. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yep, so I compared between centros and kinner, looking at their diets from a kelp forest, urchin barons, and invertebrate-dominated wolves. And so I was looking at kinner and centros in those 3 different habitats. And from that, I found that centros are pretty much kind of indiscriminately graze, so they'll eat pretty much anything around them. Whereas kinner prefer kelp. So in the kelp forest, we found way more kelp in their guts compared to centros, which their diet was consistent across the 3 habitats.
And just to get into the nitty-gritty of how you went about this, you actually got into the kinner and centro guts.
Yeah, so for the gut contents, pretty much dissected a whole lot of urchins, or cut them open, took out the gut contents and then pulled apart the gut contents and looked at it under a microscope. And then we also did a feeding experiment where I fed them various things, and also did stable isotopes, which is it gives you kind of an indication of what they've been eating. So if they've been eating more animal material, we'll give them a higher level of something, versus if they've been eating solely kelp. So it kind of gives you a longer diet picture versus the gut context, which is just kind of what they've been eating from that day.
And so the summary, it sounds to me is kinner are quite focused on the algae, on the seaweed, on the kelp.
Yep.
But centro will eat whatever is nearby.
Yeah, and some of that is to do with the behaviour of the urchin as well. Yeah, centros, they have a home scar that they tend to come back to. So they kind of just will indiscriminately graze around that home scar overnight and then come back to their little home at dawn. Whereas kinna tend to be out a lot more foraging and tend to target those kelp and algae species more.
So during the day they hide away at their home base, a part of the rock they've scraped repeatedly so that it looks scarred. And as the number of Centrostephanus increases, more areas cross the tipping point from a habitat with some urchins amongst it into full-on barrens. And once it's in a barren state, anything that tries to grow quickly gets munched. Why the increase? Well, good old warming ocean temperatures due to climate change seems to be one reason. Here's Ari.
I mean, these are a subtropical species, so they do better when the water's warmer, and they spawn during winter. So if winter temperatures are warm, then these guys are doing well. So following the the really warm 2022, we saw a massive recruitment of Centro right across the coastline, particularly at the offshore islands, which are generally warmer and more closely related to that East Auckland current. I mean, they've been increasing over the last 25 years without a doubt, but those really warm winters, it seems are really key for, really giving their populations a boost.
And a second reason is likely a lack of predators, in particular kaura, or lobsters. And so, starting in April 2023, Doc and the University of Auckland, with support from a local hapū, set up a small-scale research trial, basically testing a way to manage the Centrostephanus by getting rid of them from some areas. They picked 3 small sites within the marine reserve at which they would go in and either remove or cull the Centrostephanus. And it appeared to be working. The kelp was returning. So they made the decision to scale up the trial to 5 larger sites in which Centro were culled or removed in May 2025. They had a number of questions. Is this a feasible way to control them? Will the reef recover? And if so, how quickly? And also, how rapidly will the Centrostephanus return? And I'm skipping over it for now, but we'll get back to that decision because it's unusual. This is a native species in a marine reserve. But this week, as well as in-depth surveys of the initial small pilot sites, the researchers have been diving at some of these larger sites. Here's Ari again.
So we're just at Landing Bay Pinnacle. This is a site where 6 months ago a bunch of Centrostephanus got removed. So we're just kind of going in to have a look and see what's happened to the reef in the ensuing 6 months. So we've got a long-term camera there and we've got a hydrophone there and we're periodically surveying it to kind of track the change.
Right, so when you do the survey it's probably transects and fish counts, and today is just kind of a look-see.
Yep, that's it. Yep, it's good to get in as often as we can just so we can really understand how things are progressing, but then we do our large kind of follow-up surveys on probably a yearly basis.
This is one of the regular dive sites at the Poor Knights Islands. And as he gets ready to dive, Dr. Nick Shears chimes in with some context.
This site has historically been, this pinnacle, historically been covered in kelp. Crispin Middleton has these great pictures of it from 2014, completely covered in kelp, and there'll be a rich understory of all sorts of different invertebrates, different colourful creatures living underneath the kelp. But about 5 to 10 years ago, it completely switched to a Centrostephanus barren, and it's the imagery that he's got shows this change. It's just incredible. And so that's some of those changes, and documenting it has been what sort of led to the removals, trialling the removals.
We're kind of encountering more people, who that's the case. They were out here 10 years ago and diving in a kelp forest, and then go back to the same site today, and it's just an urchin barren. So things are changing pretty quickly.
Yep, good to go.
The dive is quick. Some cleaning of the time-lapse camera, which takes a picture once a day, and a quick check of the hydrophone, which is constantly recording. The differences in sound before and after the trial and from treatment versus control sites will later be analysed by Dr. Louise Wilson at the University of Auckland. She shared some sound files with me as examples. Here are the little sounds that invertebrates and fishes make on the reef. Well, this is what it sounds like underwater when the urchins come out to feed. Back on the boat, post-dive, I ask Ari how it was looking down there now.
Oh, it was pretty stunning. I mean, 6 months ago, Landing Bay Pinnacle was bare rock and encrusting algae with, a handful of plants. With thousands of kelp plants down there now, and I think when we do the surveys in 6 months' time, we'll be looking at a full kelp forest again with all the makings of a vibrant understory, like it would have been 20 years ago. So it's cool to see how quickly things can bounce back, but also kind of highlights the reality of where things are heading.
Yeah, and I guess with the long-term monitoring, one of the things that you might see is the re-encroachment of the Centrostephanus from outside of the region, right?
Yeah, I mean, these trials are kind of, giving us an understanding of, if we do management, what does that actually look like? But the reality is this alone is not ever going to stop the problem, because there's always going to be Centro coming back into the site. So, we need to look at this as part of a broader picture of how we manage the ecosystem and things like lobster, which here unfortunately never recovered following marine protection. What do we do about that side of the equation?
It's hopeful that the kelp recovery is so quick after the removals. And at the small trial sites, which were cleared 2.5 years ago, the differences are even starker. I went for a snorkel at one of those, and the abrupt change from barren to kelp as you move from control to treatment area is super striking. But as Ari says, without thought to wider interventions, this kind of management is only buying time. And when it comes to the impact of Centrostephanus, there's a cautionary tale we can look to from across the ditch. What happened in Tasmania?
Centrostephanus was first officially detected in Tasmania in the late 70s, and by the mid-2010s, its population had gone from near zero to 20-odd million.
Tasmania's waters are warming fast. The Centrostephanus has moved in, their numbers have exploded, and the barrens are expanding. In 2017, urchin barrens covered 15% of Tasmania's east coast rocky reefs, destroying reef ecosystems, displacing endemic species, and threatening local fisheries. They've done culling there too, but have also tried to use commercial harvest through a government-subsidised fishery, which sounds like a good idea. But
it's whether there's a long-term solution there. It's a low-value species, so I think they're struggling to really make it work in any kind of meaningful way.
Because you can eat the roe?
Yep. Like a kinna, you can eat the roe, but on a kind of international market, it's a low-quality roe, so it's not getting the high prices that some other species do, which makes it problematic from an economics perspective.
so while eating them has helped to some degree in Tasmania, it may not be the answer long term. And the scary thing is that the rate of Centrostephanus expansion here in New Zealand is faster than what they saw in Tasmania. What might help us then? Well, for Nick and Ari, that natural predator part is key. And in December 2025, after this trip, the government announced that, because of low numbers in the region, commercial and recreational fishing for rock lobster off Northland's east coast will be banned from the 1st of April 2026 for 5 years. Hopefully that helps, but it will take time for lobster numbers to rise here.
It's a pretty complicated story with lobster recruitment. I mean, they have a hugely long larval duration, so at least 12 months, and anything's got to hit a needle in a haystack to make its way back to the poor knights.
In July 2024, in response to expanding urchin barrens, the recreational catch limit for kinna and long-spined urchins was increased to 150 per day, and a new special permit was put in place. People can apply to do targeted removal or culling of urchins for marine habitat restoration. But removal only works if it's done right, says Ari and Nick, and if it's combined with monitoring and other protections.
It's about 0.3 Centrostephanus per metre squared that can control or maintain a barren state. So that's why the systematic nature of the trials is kind of key, because if you're not getting to that level, you're not actually likely to achieve anything in terms of proper, recovery of those systems. There'll still be a high enough density of urchins to trundle around and keep it in a pretty grey state. So it's got to be done properly if it's going to be effective.
Yeah, more broadly for managing urchin barrens and kinner barrens, we've seen that just removing urchins, which those permits are intended to do, only provides a temporary solution. Like the sea urchins and the kinner barrens will come back. So the key thing is where communities are interested in doing that, they're also combining it with protection measures. And so there's examples of that up in the far north with local whānau that have a rāhui also doing urchin removal. So the urchin removal is helping control kinner numbers, but they're also protecting the predators to provide that sort of more holistic approach. Simply going in and removing urchins and not doing anything else is not really a long-term solution. But the places like the Poor Knights, which are already fully protected, that's where the challenge lies, right? Like how do you manage this moving forward, and is there a place for active removal just so we can maintain some of the areas in a more natural state that, without Centrostephanus?
And yeah, this is a marine reserve. No touch, no take. Without the correct permits, it's illegal to remove anything from here. And the purpose of the 1971 Marine Reserves Act is to preserve underwater areas of New Zealand for the scientific study of marine life. So as this is a native species just living its life, should it just be left alone?
Without some intervention, we'll end up with nothing. I don't want my grandkids or my great-grandkids in the future to have nothing.
This is Sandra Hawken from Te Whānau a Rangiwhakaahu, a hapū of Ngāti Wai.
I am a maki from Matapoti Bay, and it's an amazing place, a little piece of, paradise on this earth. It's gorgeous.
Alongside Doc and the University of Auckland, Sandra has also been part of this management trial, out on the boat whenever she can make it. But she's clear that theirs is not the only hapū that have a connection to the islands.
There are a lot of other hapū that whakapapa there that, are just as important and want to see good results out there as well. And they all do different things in their own way.
During Sandra's childhood, the ocean off Matapoti Bay was both supermarket and playground.
Growing up, the abundance was amazing. And, typical small communities that work together. When you go fishing, when anyone went fishing, you'd catch enough to feed everybody and share it around. But yes, definitely spent a lot of time in the ocean. My grandparents and my father, I guess, were kaitiaki of the area, along with all the other families that were there, but they always exercised kaitiakitanga.
It's a role Sandra has taken up, part of which is collaborating on this trial. Though she's heard commentary from some people in the community who think things should be left alone to their natural course.
And it's kind of like, well, I hear that, and while I don't necessarily disagree with them, I kind of like challenge them to say, well, what's natural? We've outfished the crayfish in that area, so therefore there are no natural predators to be able to maintain it. There was interference within that ecosystem from outside sources. So should we not then be supporting it and helping it and trying to get it back in a balanced state? For me, as a Māori and as a kaitiaki, that's what my job is.
And while this kind of native species management is the first time it's happened in a marine reserve in New Zealand, on land, it's been done before. For the last 5 years, Doc has been controlling kahu, or Australasian harrier numbers, on beaches in the Chatham Islands. That's to protect Chatham Island oyster catchers, which are only found on the islands and are down to about 350 birds. Camera monitoring has shown that kahu have been snaffling a large number of their eggs. And black-backed gulls have been managed in the past, on offshore islands and on braided rivers, to protect other threatened bird species. When I spoke to Doc's Marine Ecosystems team manager, Dr. Sarah Meadows, about the decision to go ahead with this, she said there were a lot of factors taken on board. What has happened in Tasmania, the risk to the biodiversity values of the Poor Knights Islands, and how the management trial could help inform what to do about Centrostephanus going forward. And it would be nice to wrap up here with a clear plan of what's going to be done. But as of right now, there isn't one. Monitoring continues and discussions are underway. Sandra knows what she'd like to see happen, though.
Oh, my future would be, we found a few $1 million somewhere and we're able to throw it at it to kind of get it back into a better state, and then utilise, our people and our funds to just maintain it. Along with that, though, there are kind of different arms to that, and there is one like looking into the state of the crayfish population out there, and can we fix that? Can we remedy that? What can we do about that? And then if we can get the pornites sorted, then hopefully what we learn and do there, we can then apply in other areas down the coast further, because there, it's not the only place happening.
It's not the only place, but it's an important one for reasons ecological, commercial, and cultural. Sandra has been looking back at some of the pictures and videos taken by divers and scientists across the years.
You look at some of that stuff and you think, wow, how beautiful is that? And then to realise that that is all at risk and that we could lose it all, it's just mind-boggling.
Thanks to those I spoke to for this episode. Dr. Monique Lads and Dr. Sarah Meadows of the Department of Conservation, Dr. Ari Spixima, Dr. Nick Shears and Dr. Celia Balemi of the University of Auckland, and Sandra Hawken. Further thanks to other doc and university staff who helped with logistics and background research. The hydrophone recordings were courtesy of Dr. Louise Wilson, Professor Craig Radford, Dr. Nick Shears, Te Huinga Hapū and Doc. This episode was produced by me, Claire Kincannon, and sound engineering was by William Saunders. Script editing was by Liz Garton. Tēnā kai I whakarongo mai. I'm Claire Kincannon. Have a great week. Kia pai, te wiki.